We're live. Okay, here we go. As I said, we have 12 days left till break. So we're heading towards Nisan, Shloshim Yom Lifnei HaChag. We're Dorshim, the Hilchos HaChag. So we're already well within our Pesach preparation. Purim, the 3 days of Purim behind us. So before we get into Pesach proper, let's get into Shabbos haGADOL. What is Shabbos haGADOL? Shabbos haGADOL is the Shabbos before Pesach. And as we're going to see, it's very, very amazing Chassidus. The truth is, you won't find a whole bunch of Chassidus about Shabbos haGADOL before the Rabbi. He sort of opened up, like he did in many, many areas, just days on the calendar that were sort of hanging around there. There's a little somewhat celebration of them, but we didn't like sort of plumb the depths of it until he opened our eyes. This is, in my opinion, also it's very close to the Rebbe's birthday. What day is Shabbos haGADOL? It's a trick question. It's the Shabbos before Pesach, so it falls on Shabbos, right? But what day was the original Shabbos haGADOL?
Why is it called Shabbos haGADOL?
We're going to have all these questions answered by the time we're done. But what day was the original Shabbos haGADOL? Does anyone know?
Day before Pesach?
Not the day before Pesach.
Before Yom Kippur?
Not before Yom Kippur.
The date is Shabbos.
What date of the month? See, some of our wise ones are looking, trying to find out. You know, they don't want to come up empty-handed. Take a look. It's Yud Nisan, but because the Rebbe's birthday is Yud Aleph Nisan, and it's always mamash in conjunction, and sometimes it's even on Shabbos haGADOL. Therefore, I feel that this what he brings out here is an extraordinary chiddush, and it's like Rebbe's birthday level chiddush. So let's look into it. There's not just one sikh on Shabbos haGADOL, by the way. There's several, and they're all kind of in the same direction. And if you like this one, perhaps we'll do another one. But there's a lot to prepare for Pesach, and we only have a little half an hour snippet, so we'll see if we can get through what we can get through. In the meantime, let's begin. Shabbos haGADOL. Regarding Shabbos haGADOL, shenikva lezecher nes, it was established as a remembrance for a particular miracle that happened before we came out of Egypt. Right there on the first page, Aleph 52. Right, and is the nes that happened right before we came out of Mitzrayim. What day was it? B'yom Asiri b'Nisan. It was on the 10th day of Nisan. Shechal az b'yom Shabbos. That year, it came out to be that the 10th day of Nisan was on Shabbos. And he says, like it was this year in 1986. Yudu Ashela. It's known, the question. Very famous question. It's brought in the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch. This is a question that's asked by all. Also, the Alter Rebbe asked this question in his Shulchan Aruch. Madua nikva zichron yom ze liyom hashavua Shabbos v'lo liyom hachodesh. That's why I kind of asked you a trick question before. Why was this day fit to be celebrated on the day of the week as opposed to the day of the month, which was the 10th of Nisan? We knew it was the 10th of Nisan that this miracle happened. Kederech shenikvu kol hamoedim. And why is it such a big question? Because if anyone can point out to me even one other Jewish holiday that we celebrate besides Shabbos, right? That we celebrate on a day of the week and not a day of the month. In other words, when's the holiday? It's the 15th of this month, the 14th of that month, it's the 6th of this month, it's the 19th of Kislev, it's the 18th of Elul. But you won't find one holiday that it's Thursday, right? There's no such thing as a Jewish holiday that's just because it's that day of the week, except for Shabbos haGADOL. It's a holiday that we celebrate specifically in line with the 7 days of the week, Shabbos. Even though we know what day it was on the 10th of Nisan, we don't honor it as a holiday that happened on the 10th of Nisan. We always celebrate it on Shabbos before Pesach, even when that requires us to move it off of its actual day of the 10th of Nisan. For example, like most years, it's just the Shabbos before Pesach, even if it's on the 11th, 12th, 13th, or 14th. So what's the story? And he says, by the way, does anyone know what the miracle was that happened that day? I'm sure we do. We have a lot of chachamim over here, but you're rusty because it was almost a year ago. What happened, the great miracle that we're celebrating on Shabbos haGADOL?
The Bechorim killed the Bechorim rose up and
That's right.
yeah.
Very good. there's actually a couple different opinions. We're going to see that the Alter Rebbe chooses very wisely or very mechuvan, like very exactly, which reason from the Rishonim that he decides to bring down. But essentially what happened was, on the 10th day of Nisan is the day that Moshe told us to go and take a seh labais, go get a sheep. So we're going to be ready to be makriv the Korban Pesach on the 14th of Nisan. And he told us to do it on the 10th. Why on the 10th? Why did he tell us to take it on the 10th? Because, yes?
10 plus 4 equals 14.
Right, but why didn't he tell us to take it on the 6th or the 7th or the 8th or the 9th? What was the chiddush that he said go on the 10th specifically and take this?
That was Shabbos before.
So it would happen to be Shabbos also, but the simple reason is because when you take a animal to be makriv, you have to check it for at least minimum of 4 days in order for blemishes, right? So he told us to take it 4 days before, so we could basically they tied it to the bedpost. It was so precious to them, and they checked it for 4 days. Where do we have a little remnants of this idea of checking for 4 days in our Avodas Hashem? In the month of Elul, when we have slichos, right? You're supposed to have slichos a certain period of time before Rosh Hashanah, and it can be more days, it can be less days, but the minimum number of days that you have slichos and you can't have less is these 4 days. And it's because you yourself are like a carbon, and you have to check yourself for blemishes and apologize to Hashem and clean yourself up and get ready to be makriv yourself to God on Rosh Hashanah. So you need at least 4 days of slichos. But we learned this from here, that you need 4 days to check. So on the 10th of Nisan, it happened to be Shabbos, they took this sheep. And what happened, as David said, the Egyptians came around and said, what's with the sheep? Because they worship the sheep. And we said, we're going to sacrifice your God right in front of your face when Hashem takes us out of Egypt and kills all the firstborn. And it was the firstborn they were asking us what's doing. So the firstborn, as we're going to soon see in the Sikha, they went back to Egypt and to Paro and to all their families, and they said, basically, let my people go. Right? They took on Moshe's chant, and they didn't want to let them go. And so therefore they made a war with their own people, and they killed tons and tons of Egyptians. And this was the miracle. Some people want to say, the Torah wants to say, that's how the Alter Rebbe explains it. The Torah wants to say that the miracle was that they didn't do anything to the Jews when we told them we're going to kill their God in front of them and all the firstborn together. And they just sort of stood there silent. According to him, that was the miracle. According to the Alter Rebbe, the miracle was they went back and fought this war. Fine. In any case, this happened on the 10th of Nisan, but they fixed it on Shabbos, unlike every single other holiday on the entire Jewish calendar. And the question is why? But Adarabba, seemingly on the contrary, why was there this miracle? It was connected with the taking of the sheep of the Korban Pesach, as we just said. And if you look in the Torah, Parshas Bo, it tells you it literally mentions not every holiday is mentioned by name, the day, right? It says on the 10th of the month you shall take a sheep. So since this 10th of the month of Nisan was actually mentioned as a commandment in the Torah, seemingly the very, very good reason to fix this day as the 10th of Nisan, the miracle of the 10th of Nisan. In other words, it's even more strange why they moved it over to Shabbos. Right? It says, you should take the sheep on the 10th of the month. Therefore, of all the holidays, in fact, this one seemingly should have been established on a day of the month, not connected with a day of the week. Rabbi wants to point out even more than every other single Jewish holiday, this one should be on a day of the month, because it says the day of the month in the Torah, and this of all of them is the only one that's not. That's already a little bit of a curiosity, I would say, gentlemen. The Alter Rebbe in his Shulchan Aruch, Mevi es hateretz shel Magen Avram. Now there's a reason al pi nigla why this was done. And again, to the Chachamim in the room, what is the reason al pi nigla? These are some good trivia questions. Why in the Pashtus did they do this? Does anyone know? Mm-hmm.
Because it wasn't given on the 10th of December, it was given on Shabbos.
That's patently untrue, my friend.
Okay.
No, it was the 10th of Nisan Shabbos, right?
Yeah.
The reason is because, as he says over there in the name of the Magen Avram, the Fisha Bas Sarah ben Nisan, something else important happened on Sarah ben Nisan. What? Mesa Miriam. Miriam, Moshe's sister, passed away. And therefore, now obviously, this happened later than the story of the war with the Egyptians. But I guess when they were settling down later on in history, they tried to make holidays and figure out how to put this whole thing together in a religion. They said, let's see, we have a couple things that correspond to the 10th of Nisan, and they don't exactly go together. One, we have to honor Miriam's passing with a yurtzai, which is customary to fast, like it says also by Zayin Adar. In the Shulchan Aruch, it says you should fast on the yurtzai of tzaddikim. We have a little bit of a different custom these days. We dafka eat. But the point is there is such a concept of fasting. And since when it falls on the 10th of Nisan is Miriam's yurtzai, you're supposed to fast. How can you simultaneously have a holiday to celebrate this big miracle and feast? So they got into one of the first Jewish quagmires over here. How do we deal with our religion? It's the contradictory events. So they said, you know what? No problem. Let's just push it on to Shabbos. It was the 10th of Nisan, yes, but it also happened to be Shabbos. So therefore, let's kind of just make this whole new idea, and we'll celebrate this miracle on Shabbos, not on the 10th. That's like the answer al pig nigla why this happened this way, which is such an unusual thing. They wanted to celebrate it. The day was taken. So they pushed it into the same day, but just a day of the week. Yeah.
So why is it contradictory to have a holiday to fast? There's lots of holidays here on fast.
Would you fast on Purim? Would you fast on Pesach? Would you fast on Shavuos? Would you fast on Rosh Hashanah? Would you fast on Yom Kippur? You got me there. But the idea is that fasting on Yom Kippur is part of the mitzvah of the Torah. In general, there's a miracle. You celebrate it by eating, by celebrating, rejoicing. It's the opposite of the sadness of a yurtzeit. They don't go together. They do now, because I just came actually from a yurtzeit, a very holy man. I think his son is coming to maybe daven mincha here. But we actually feast on a yurtzeit as a huge chiddush that has, it's all based on Kabbalah. Who was the first person's yurtzeit that we feasted on instead of fasted? When did this come about?
Rashbi.
The Rashbi. He told us it's a Yom Hilula. He called his yurtzeit a wedding. He saw that in the day that he died, he wants everyone to celebrate. And in fact, he did. There was even a story where some of the students of the Arizal came and they were fasting in like sort of in a negative, like sad, distraught mood, and the Rashbi got upset and Mamish did a horrible thing to them, and like he messed them up in life. Because he said he wanted to make a point that you are a Kabbalist and you know the secrets of the Rashbi and you're going to be sad on my yurtzeit. So from that point on, we started to rejoice on yurtzeits. But all up until that time, yurtzeit was the way you honored it was to be in distress, kind of, and fasting, right? So therefore, it didn't go together. Why is it dafka the Rashbi switch this Indian around? How do you change the concept of a yurtzeit? Because basically, he showed us the Eitz Chaim, the secret that people don't really die, and that like the life of a tzaddik is everlasting, and therefore you can actually celebrate his life even more so after he died. This whole thing he brought to a great level of revelation, and so he sort of changed the whole concept of a yurtzeit. That's why it's an Indian in Pnimius HaTorah. I remember a couple of years ago, I think I told you guys this before, but Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, Alav HaShalom, he passed away some years ago, and the year after, it was one of the biggest funerals that happened in like modern history. There was like 1 million people on the streets of Jerusalem. It was crazy. And the next year, Am Yisrael wanted to come together and like celebrate the yurtzeit with song and feasting. And his children came out with psak din. God forbid, my father, Mamish, would fast on the yurtzeit. Where do you get these crazy customs? This not. And the truth is because he wasn't from the Kabbalists openly. And it's a Kabbalistic Inyan, it's a Hasidic Inyan to rejoice in these times. Anyway, chutz mizeh, these 2 days did not go together. So they figured, you know what, good Jewish cup. They said, we'll put this one on Shabbos, we'll fast on 10th of Nisan, Shalom Yisrael. They ran into another problem later, which is that we don't fast in Nisan, but that's another story. The days of Nisan, they're all holidays. They're all holidays. Yeah, but for your site, yeah, you might have a heter there for Miriam. Anyway, so the point is, Alpi Nigla, this is why we wound up with a holiday during a weekday as opposed to a day in the Jewish month. But since everything in the Torah is exact, we have to say this, that they wound up creating the holiday on a weekday as a day of the week. And they changed it from all other Jewish holidays. It's very not Hasidic to say that they just, oops, we bumped into a yurtzeit, so we'll just move the whole holiday, as though that's like the only reason. That is a reason, but there's obviously reasons upon reasons upon reasons. That's the external reason, but there's a deep, deep, satisfying inner reason why this is a holiday that takes place on Shabbos specifically. It's because the nes on this day, it's because this one holiday, out of all the holidays of the Jewish calendar, it has more shaykhs to be celebrated in a weekday, in other words, a day of the 7 days of the week, than it does in one of the 29, 30 days of the month. And he gives an example for something of this ilk. In other words, the Rabbi is trying to say he's going to plumb the depths of a reason which is given in Nigla, which is, well, Miriam's yurtzeit, so we'll push it off to Shabbos, which is what it says in the Shulchan Aruch. But what's the real reason, right? So in Al Derech Zeh, in a similar vein, the Rebbe brings another example like that, where there's a reason in Nigla, but really that's not the real reason. There's a much deeper reason. And most of you will know about this, especially our Samech Vavers out there. So he says, "Dugma lemavur odos yom tov Rosh Hashanah shechal yos b'Shabbos." Right? There's a famous hemshech, many more than one, that begins with the idea that on Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos. Right? Ein token b'shofar. You don't blow a shofar b'Medina outside of the temple. Right? Michutz the mikdash. And this is a halacha. Does anyone know why we don't blow a shofar on Rosh Hashanah? What's that? That's right. It's called the Gezerah de Rabba, right? Rabba comes along and says, it's actually the same thing with the Megillah we just had. You might come to, in fact, it's very much shaykh to this year, right? That you don't read the Megillah on Shabbos, because you might come to carry it. It's a rarity, but it happened this year, right? In Yerushalayim, Shushan Purim fell on Shabbos. That's why we went into this whole splitting of the sea with 3 days of Purim, because of this Gezerah de Rabba, right? And here you have it in Rosh Hashanah. We don't blow the shofar if it falls on Shabbos, right? So many people want to say, in all the Rishonim, Mefarshim of all ilks, they say it's a little bit of a strange gezerah, right? Because who doesn't know how to blow the shofar? Who in this room doesn't know how to blow a shofar? You can figure it out in a few minutes. It's not rocket science, right? It's not that complicated to blow a shofar. And who doesn't know how to blow a shofar? Pashut, what we call Amei Aratzim. Like simpletons on the most basic level. Okay, some halachas in the shofar is not that simple. But honestly, you can get away with blowing a shofar and be yotzi much easier than you think. And therefore, for whom do we negate this mitzvah deraisa, which is such a klal? It's published at the beginning of the year, bringing out all the hamshachas for the simplest people. So the question is asked, you're going to remove this mitzvah, which all the hamshacha, the entire year depends on, from the greatest tzaddikim in all of Am Yisrael, for some guy who doesn't know how to blow a shofar, is going to carry it Daled Amos in Rosh Hashanah. That's the reason, Gezerah de Rabba. But Chassidus comes and says that is the reason. Just like we don't celebrate Shabbos haGADOL on Yud Nisan because of Miriam's yurtzeit. Yes, that is the reason. But there's a much, much, much deeper reason. The reason is because Shabbos haGADOL has an intrinsic shaykhus to Shabbos, and the reason for shofar is because there's a much deeper reason why we don't blow the shofar on Shabbos. What is it, Yoshua? No, that's the external reason. I'm asking your other Yeshua, Menachem Mendel. What's the reason you don't blow the shofar on Shabbos? Al Pi Chassidus. What's that? Right? Yeah.
Because the world's already elevated to a level where it's like you don't need the shofar.
Exactly. What Shabbos accomplishes just from being Shabbos already does what the shofar would do if you blew it on Rosh Hashanah. In other words, Rosh Hashanah is an awesome day, and when it falls on the weekday, you can sort of amplify it with this power of the shofar. But if it falls on Shabbos, that great amplification that you would get, Shabbos does that to Rosh Hashanah. So then why do we actually blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah in the temple? Then?
I think it was said to see even higher.
Even higher, right? Because if there's a temple on this world, B'ezrat Hashem, it should be speedily rebuilt. If there's a temple on this world, it means the whole world is just like able to contain more godliness. And therefore, even if it's Rosh Hashanah and even if it's Shabbos, you could still go yet higher and blow the shofar. But outside the temple, no. So what do you see? When Rabbi came and gave this gezerah, he was really giving a reason that was not the real reason. It's true. We are worried about the Am Haaretz, and it trickles down to a nuts and bolts reality that you have to worry about carrying. But the reason that there is such a worry on this world is because Lamaila, there's absolutely no spiritual reason to blow a shofar. And therefore it comes out down Lamata that there's got to be some law which prohibits you from blowing a shofar because there's no spiritual shofar going. And the same is true when it comes to what we're dealing with right here. That really Shabbos haGADOL is celebrated on Shabbos not because Miriam's Yurtzeit is on Shabbos. That's also true. That happened because Shabbos haGADOL really belongs on Shabbos. And therefore, Lamata, there was also sort of events that took place which pushed it into a scenario where we celebrated on Shabbos. But the real reason is because whatever happened at that miracle is uniquely associated with Shabbos and not the days of the month. On we go. Is everyone following along? Okay.
It's like Chassidus doesn't add anything new, just enlightens.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So we're saying here that same here with Rabbi. It's just really it's like a side Inyan, but the real reason is because Yom Tov Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos. You don't need a shofar because of the awesome Inyan of Shabbos, etc. It removes the necessity for a shofar. Fine. Post base. We have a couple more minutes. Let's see what we can do. Havanas hashayches ben anei shel Shabbos haGADOL lekaviyas mea shavua. So what is the connection between this particular miracle with the Egyptian firstborn and the day of Shabbos, or a holiday that's connected to the weekdays, or the days of the week? Well, first understand this by first understanding, which is it's important stuff to know, why every other single Jewish holiday is connected with a day of the month and not a day of the week. In other words, that's really the question. Why are all of our holidays associated with a day of the month and not the day of the week? So first you have to understand these little cycles in our lives, which we could just sort of rolling through without paying them much mind. They have awesome significance, that you don't just happen to be traveling 6-7 days and then starting over 7 days and then starting over 7 days, starting over since you were a baby, right? There's something going on with that whole cycle. And at the same time, there's another thing going on with this cycle. You're going 29, 30 days, and they're all happening simultaneously, the sun and the moon. We're living inside of these forces, right? And why is it that the Jewish holidays are all associated with the force which is connected with the months? So he says the difference between the weekdays and the months is as follows. Yemei HaShavua, Shivas Mea Breshis, B'Habriya, the 7 days of creation, and the creation itself, the existence of the creation itself, Kashurim Mabriya Atzma, is Sheishis Yamim Masa Havayas HaShamayim V'Sa'aretz V'Yom HaShvi Shabbos V'Nafash. That the whole idea of creation, right, is connected essentially with these 7 days. That's why Hashem, when he created the world in 6 days and he rested on the seventh. Now you might say, well, there's a big difference between the 6 days and the seventh day, because really on Shabbos he rested from creation. So maybe you have a havamina to think that's not actually part of creation in the same way that the 6 days are. He says, no, the truth is the menucha atzma hi chelik memaisa bereshis, that the rest is actually part of the works and deeds of creation. As the sages said, shla'ach sheishis me bereshis haya olam chaser menucha. Right? The sages asked, after 6 days, what was the world missing? It was missing menucha, ba Shabbos ba menucha. When Shabbos came, the world gained that which it was missing. So if we're going to say the world was missing rest, that means even the rest of creation is actually part of creation. Because without it, the world is missing something. right? Bas Shabbos, Bas Menucha, the rest of Shabbos is therefore actually a part of the Metzius of the world. In other words, you can't have a world without a Shabbos in it. And therefore, all the 6 days and the 7th day, they represent creation itself. Even though you might have a Havamina that the 7th day he stopped creating. No, the stopping of creation and resting is also part of creation. Whereas, the union of a Chodesh, this is actually interesting to point out that the Chodesh did not exist in the beginning of creation. In other words, there's actually an order, and it's kind of funny to say that because we know the world was created on the 25th of Elul. There was already sort of months seemingly mixed into the reality, but there's an interesting statement from the sages which seems to indicate that Hashem did not really make the concept of months until he had already created his world. And there was such a thing where there was like a moment in time where there was creation of weeks, but there was not yet the invention by God of the notion of months. Where do we see this? It's kind of funny to understand it, but this is what the sages said. It says that months were like an add-on, where the sages said, when Hashem chose his world, he established Rosh Chodeshes, right? Which means basically he had a world, and then he chose his world. Something happened where he's like, you know what? I like what I see here. And therefore he decreed a new thing called Rosh Chodesh. This is really before the Jewish people even sort of came into town, right? But nonetheless, he decided, I'm going to add a cycle to this 7-day repetitive situation, and it's going to be called the lunar cycle. And all of a sudden, there's such a thing called Rosh Chodesh. And the Indian of Rosh Chodashim is not therefore connected with the world mitzad the Bria itself. In other words, the Bria is 6 days, and the 7th day you shall rest. That's creation. Comes like an add-on to creation. I said, so I like to choose my creation and give it a gift. And he gave it Rosh Chodesh, right? This that Hashem chose his world, this shows on the fact that he added something to his world which was not intrinsic to the creation of the world itself, which is called Rosh Chodesh. And I think we're out of time, but we will pick this up tomorrow with Hashem's help. Yeah.
Next level.
Yeah.